Hello, everyone. I'm Debbie Malillo for Technology Transfer Tactics. Welcome to today's program titled Get Aggressive and Double Your Faculty's Invention Disclosure Rates. Before I introduce our presenter for today, I'd like to make some housekeeping announcements. This program is being recorded, and I'll provide you with information at the end of our call on how you can purchase a copy of the recorded version. At the conclusion of the lecture portion, there will be time for a question and answer period, and the operator will come on the line and give you instructions on how to get into the queue to ask your question. So if you have any as we go along, please jot them down and we'll try to get to as many as possible. If you'd like to submit a question via the chat function during the presentation, simply click on the Public tab under the chat section and type your question in the box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them when appropriate. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our Tech Transfer University Total Access Pass attendees. Our Total Access Pass allows you to customize a distance learning program for your staff and faculty at a steeply discounted price with 4 convenient formats. And you can get details on our website at www.technologytransfertactics.com and click on Tech Transfer University on the left sidebar. I'm very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Gary Bright, who is the Director of Innovation Management at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. Gary, welcome to the program.
And as we get started, I'd like to thank Technology Transfer Tactics for hosting this event. I think it's terrific. And Debbie for your fine work, and also especially for all the attendees. You know, we've just finished Mardi Gras season, and it's a famous time. We have a lot of dinners and gala balls and all of that sort of thing, but we're really famous for those pre-ball parties. They're the most raucous and probably the most fun. And I think of this as a pre-autumn party because I think we'll be able, hopefully, to open a dialogue today. And many of us, I hope, can continue this dialogue in San Antonio in the next few days. But for today, we've got a lot of business, so I'll jump right into it. We'll only have about 12 or 14 slides, I think, and there'll be a number of words around each one of those slides. But I know there's plenty of time for questions. So let's get started. This is an intriguing topic. As you know, it's really the life's blood for tech transfer offices. It's something I think that we all focus on. We'll get a chance to talk about it today, and then I hope next Wednesday through Saturday when I'm in San Antonio. My career started, and I think it's important to see these histories sometime because I think it's the way we get formed. So my career started in industry at Revlon, as you see here, and Antibodies Incorporated. And since that time, so 15 years in industry and now something like 17, 19 years in academia. In industry, I was concerned about launching new products and brand management, marketing products. So I think some of the techniques that IT&T and Revlon used, marketing tactics, certainly spill over into the way we approach technology transfer. And a bit about academia. So I opened an office at Creighton University back in the 1990s. It's home of the Blue Jays, as you can see here. It's been a very popular office. It's done well. You may remember we did an Encore Med transaction a few months after the office started. Wall Street Journal wrote something about that. It was a de novo startup for tech transfer. The focus, of course, was getting invention disclosures in a climate where we had never had any. And then I moved to the University of South Alabama, the Jaguars. Forbes has labeled South Alabama as one of the most productive tech transfer offices in America a few years ago. And as you'll have seen from the autumn data over the years, on a research base of $30 million, I think South Alabama has been bringing in between $2 and $3 million a year in income for the last 10 or 12 years. I moved then to Texas and most recently the University of Manitoba. And now I'm launching an office at Louisiana Lafayette. I think it's an IQ test whether folks will launch more than one of these de novo offices. I suspect I fail, but certainly those years and those different offices had formed the way we approach generating disclosures. And again, we think of tech transfer as a sales and marketing issue with heavy overlays of the technical and legal. So, for instance, when we recruit, we'd really like to recruit brand managers from industry, but it's difficult to do in the academic milieu, so we tend to recruit scientists and try to back in or teach something about sales and marketing tactics. And in fact, that's those tactics, we really establish a common dialogue in our office and go from there. So let me go down to the next. It looks like we're locked up. Kim, can you advance this slide? There we go. So, at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, just one word on that. 18,000 students in Acadiana. You'll remember this, folks were the Canadians at first and moved to Louisiana 150 years ago. The university has just developed a critical mass in research and therefore thought it should get out and do formal tech transfer. We've had a tech transfer operation through the years, but there were certain deficiencies, so we're trying to launch a modern tech transfer office. This university is probably characterized by strengths in engineering, chemistry, physics, and computer sciences. We had one of the first advanced computer sciences programs. Some of you will recognize this school, this university, because of Chef Paul Prudhomme, and you may have eaten at K. Paul in New Orleans. But some of you will recognize that, and I hope some of you recognize James Lee Burke, the fantastic author who wrote those Steve Robichaux mysteries. But at any rate, that's where we are today. All right, so I need you to advance the slide again here. So today's topic. Some time ago, this approach to generating invention disclosures was labeled the Southern Paradigm. And we'll get into this. It is an iterative approach, as you see, if you read along with me. It's an iterative approach to generating new IP disclosures. If you wanted to read about this, you could go to the Autumn Practice Manual and read an article by Bress and Munson and myself a long, long time ago. But at any rate, this is a way to generate new invention disclosures. But more importantly, we want to shape those invention disclosures because we think we can affect the marketability of those technologies, and we also think we can help control costs. So it's stimulating invention disclosures. It's about shaping invention disclosures. This process is also really the first step towards building a collegial relationship and providing excellent service. Having said that, then, for those first few words, the problem with this, and there is a bit of a problem, this approach is a bit labor intensive. So it's going to be a challenge to implement in some programs. But for the typical average tech transfer program with the typical staffing levels that we see reported in Autumn, this is a completely digestible challenge. And again, it's all about enhancing the process for faculty members. We're going to talk then today about that process, go through it. We'll talk about start at the top, how we begin to communicate this approach within the organization, especially in the highest levels of the academic ranks. We want to talk about the research plan. Research plans exist. Tech transfer folks don't talk about them very much, but we know they're there, and we know that they can help us predict and plan for productivity, and they're an underutilized tool. Of course, the primary objection by academics is sometimes this extra burden that the innovation process produces or induces. So that we'll talk about that process. But so here we go. We're going to stimulate new invention disclosures. More importantly, we want to shape those invention disclosures, and we want to do that in a cost-effective way. The next slide, then, Debbie, is an old look at Autumn annual survey results. I don't know how many of you have looked at it this way. That's not a particularly attractive slide, but I think it's important to see. We tend to look at last year or what's happened over that period, 2001 to 2011, but I think it's informative to look back to the older reports. And you can see the relationship if you jump down to the second, third lines of royalty income and the growth of invention disclosures and the ratio of those changes. And we didn't strip it in, but it's a topic for discussion later. We know that universities in the U.S. produce about 600 startups last year, and there were about 50 in Canada. So we can see that the percent of invention disclosures that actually result in startup companies. So I just think it's important. Many of us, it's important for us to look at this history, not only because some of us actually lived it, but it's important to understand the nature of the work and how invention disclosures have grown really dramatically, but how royalty income has grown even more dramatically, and maybe thanks to Lyrica. There you go. Debbie, would you advance me again? All right. So at this point, I think when you're considering your portfolio or your office, it's informative to think about how we're going to communicate before we start calling on individual faculty members and we see the red light yelling. I think it's important that we think about how we're going to tell this story, particularly to the highest levels on the academic side and on the administrative side for that matter. And so if you're opening a new office, you're going to use this technique. If you're trying to do a turnaround or an office that's existed and we're trying to revitalize the office, we're going to use this technique. Or if you're a new technology transfer manager and you're just picking up a portfolio, this is a good way to go. We have to remember, just as if we're doing a turnaround in a business, when one looks at a business and thinks about a turnaround, there are certain communications that have to happen. And these are sometimes complex because I think that many of us believe that university tech transfer offices have something like 11 different constituency groups, probably more. But we know there are new inventors, and we're going to talk a lot about those folks today. We know that there are inventors who have some experience, good or bad, inventors with experience. They're different groups. They need to be treated differently. They have different demands, different needs, different expectations. There are also prospective industrial partners who are observing us from the process, and they're another constituency. Of course, there are angel investors and professional investors, and they're different. They have a different profile. They have different demands. They have different expectations when we present information to them. There are senior managers and administrators at the university, and frankly, we spend no time other than at the very beginning trying to communicate with that group. We trust that through various reports in the operation of our business, they'll see our results. There are other universities, because universities could do a better job of bundling technologies and open innovation. We'll get a chance to talk about that. So they're another constituency. We know that economic development authorities are increasingly an important constituency, and incubators, and finally, government. In Louisiana, all tech transfer offices even have to report to the state legislature every year certain metrics for something called the GRAD Act, and submitting that information has a relationship to tuition changes. So these are very real, these constituencies, and our communication, or the approach we have to communication, which is going to boil down to faculty members ultimately, is where we're going to get to. There. Okay. So having said that, when we're talking about an existing business case, and I just jumped there to test the system here. If we're talking about an existing business case and we're refinancing a company or recapitalizing a company, there are three possibilities of what's happened, and two of the three aren't positive, right? So either we've exceeded our revenue expectations and it's golden days and everything is good, or we're flat on revenue expectations or we're failing to meet those. That's the current business state. We, as a new tech transfer director, or revitalizing an office or starting an office, we need to understand that that's the baseline business, but we have to create a case for a new compelling opportunity. And we're going to communicate in the following fashion. We want to meet first with the chief academic officer. In some universities it's called the provost. But this academic officer needs to understand, number one, our commitment to the academic milieu, and subsequent to that, then the approach we're going to take to tech transfer, the policies that we're going to follow, and the practices that we're going to use. So the first thing we do as we're getting ready to address faculty members is talk to the provost. We expect that conversation will take 45 minutes. It's one of the least structured communications we have. You'll see that our communications with faculty members are very, very, very structured. But at any rate, so the first call we should make, the very first call before anyplace else, is that provost or the chief academic officer. Then subsequent to that time, we're going to talk to the dean, and the dean wants to hear about service expectations. Again, a different message. That conversation is going to take 45 minutes, typically, and so we go there. Finally, we get to the department chair. Now, we want to do 2 or 3 things with the department chair. We want to remind them of the process from the faculty viewpoint. And we also want to secure, as you'll see in the next line below, a departmental seminar invitation. Because we're going to impact the faculty members through our newsletter, if we have one, through the direct visits that we make, and through the departmental presentations. So it's important that we get to that head of the department or chair and secure an invitation to present. Only after making those contacts, we want to start with faculty members. We really try to be as rigorous as we can about that, so that nobody gets surprised up and down the chain. And so now we're really at that point where we can start talking about the Southern paradigm. And the Southern paradigm, as we discussed before, is an iterative process. It's a cybernetic process. It's self-correcting, and it's a loop process that we're going to use to generate invention disclosures. It works like a charm. It's a bit labor-intensive, and there's various discrete steps that are natural and normal and faculty appreciate. So the program is just developed, and many folks use this thing, and I think it's been referred to as the Southern paradigm. It might be the Northern paradigm, or perhaps even the Western. But at any rate, people have been calling it the Southern paradigm at least since that publication. And it's really focused on faculty service and understanding the faculty's pressures. And by that, we want to understand what his or her goals are, what their needs are, and their pressures. That is, we want to understand where they are in terms of tenure and promotion. We want to understand how well they're funded and by whom. And so that's a process that we go. Again, it's an orderly series of communications. We're going to step through those in the next slide. And they start just establishing a bedrock of understanding for the faculty member, those aspirations and concerns. Again, the goal is to increase the number of intellectual property disclosures, and we can drive it up. At the University of Texas, we doubled invention disclosures. We did exactly the same thing at the University of Manitoba. And already we've delivered twice as many disclosures in Lafayette as have been experienced in the past. So the idea is to drive up the number of invention disclosures, but more importantly, or as importantly, is to shape those disclosures so that they're quality disclosure. Here are the steps. First off, there's an introductory meeting. We call the faculty member and ask, and we do the trial close. Gee, I'd like to meet with you to talk about your work. I saw this publication, or I saw the successful grant application, or whatever that introductory mark is. So it's a meeting, and that's how we present it. We do the assumptive close. Would Tuesday at 10 o'clock or Friday at 2 o'clock be best? So we're going to use that to really close in. We have to get that in-person meeting. And we can send the request electronically because it's just more efficient. But the meeting, of course, has to occur in person in the faculty member's workplace. that meeting, we're very rigorous about this. We want it to, first off, we want to ask about the faculty members' work. Obviously, we will have spent a few minutes before that meeting studying what the faculty member, his or her publications. We may have taken a look at the funding levels. We may understand that. That's a challenge for us in Louisiana. But we probably will have done some homework. The meeting, we're going to talk about science until that topic's exhausted. That's why these meetings take a long time. We're going to talk about science first and technology transfer or academic. Those things aren't going to come up till the end of the meeting. They're secondary, and this meeting is always going to take between 1 and 2 hours. The longer it takes, the better we've probably done. I believe that, and Bob McBride at Salk and Bob, when he was in Virginia, really focused on metrics for a technology transfer manager. How many disclosures can a manager manage in a year? How many transactions should a manager produce? Those sorts of metrics have been around for a long time, and I'd refer you to Bob's writings years ago in Les Nouvelles, the LES publication. But we want to go in and look at this meeting. It's going to take a long time, and I believe that tech transfer managers can do 2 of these meetings a day and not more. The meetings are long. They're in the faculty member's workplace. They're based on fact because we've studied some information before, and they always include a follow-up within 2 or 3 days. So these meetings really tend to, after a 10 or 12-day period of 2 days, as we call them, it's a very grueling, tiring process. So to do this right, we can probably do about 2 of these a day, along with all of our other work products. After we focused on science, after we've understood publications in history, we understand funding, we may have learned something and should have learned something about, quote, competitive laboratories. Then after we've done all those things, then we can follow up within a couple of days. And the follow-up tends to be an electronic follow-up. And this follow-up is designed to do 2 things, really. One is to say, did I get it right? Do I understand where you're working, the field that you're working in? Did I get it right? And to reinforce the conversation. So this second second follow-on is either a publication in the field that we think is a direct hit. Gee, did you see this work by Smith or Jones? Or here's a patent, a recent patent in your area. What we're doing is confirming for both of us that we understand the field now. We've got that together, and we've established reasons for other contacts in the future. So again, you can see there's a fairly rigorous process. It started with that first introductory meeting in the faculty member's workplace. We like that because we're collecting a lot of data. We understand, is this a messy office or is it an organized office? Do they have all those journals stacked up? What schools did they graduate from? All of these sorts. How many people are working in the lab? Because we might get an idea about co-inventorship later on down the road, so joint inventorship. So all of these are clues to the process. So we've followed up. Then we've got this second follow-up, and then the ground just goes fallow for several months perhaps, and then there's another follow-up. That's C. And this follow-up tends to be a recent publication, or most importantly, a patent. We want, and especially a patent from lab that had been identified in that very first conversation back in A. So when we heard in A about the work of this faculty member and the fact that 2 competitive labs or 2 labs that were doing great work in the area are the Smith and Jones lab, we wanted to make note of those lab names. We're going to go back and look and see if we can find issued patents by Smith and or Jones. And if we can, we're going to provide that as a service to our faculty members so he or she sees what other laboratories, other folks in the field are working on, what types of intellectual properties they're working on. And then from time to time, we're going to do continuing iterations of B and C. If we do this right, we will expect that we'll have 3 of these conversations or contexts throughout the first year. and these can trail off over time, but we'd like 3 during the first year. Again, they're going to establish that we understand the field, a good understanding. They're going to demonstrate this. They're going to ensure, and they're going to establish a mode of communication, and that's as important as anything. How often we communicate, the fact that we follow up, the fact that they receive something, frankly, that they didn't expect. And again, anytime we can tie it back to luminaries in the field, that's the way we want to go. That's the approach that we'd like to take. Along the way, and this tends to be a bit sensitive, we want to discover what the research plan is. And every faculty member has a research plan. Some of them are quite formal, and they're constructed as a plan, usually 3 to 5 years. Certainly, every faculty member has communicated certain fragments or sections of that plan to funding authorities and funding agencies as they go forward. So we know they have a plan. Sometimes it's very formal, sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's shared with the entire lab, sometimes it's shared with work groups. But if we can, we want to get a hold of that plan. And we'll only be able to do that typically. It's very hard to get a hold of this plan unless we've established that good communication through the iterative process of the Southern paradigm. So now we want to step back. We need to understand that plan. We're going to look at it and consider it in conjunction with what we know about funding levels. We're going to anticipate IP development, the timeline of IP development. We may be able to use this information in the B and C communications we listed before in the Southern paradigm. Is it going to help us anticipate problems or opportunities for service, MTAs, non-disclosure agreements, that sort of thing? So this is the approach we take. We want to use the Southern paradigm first. It's our best tool. And then we want to use the research plan. Now, at this point, I'd like to remind you of our open innovation discussions. I'm sure you have those informally. You've heard open innovation discussed at autumn meetings, and I attended a session in Lille, France that for 2 years, 2 out of the last 3 years, has focused on open innovation and open innovation in universities. So we know about open innovations. We talk about it. We understand it. The notion was elucidated by Chesbrough at the University of California, Berkeley, and we understand and verbalize open innovation, but universities do a pretty horrendous job of using the tools of open innovation. For instance, when was the last time your university, your office, in-licensed a technology to facilitate bundling? So the notions of open innovation then, and using the research plan fits right into our effective use of open innovation. Can we bundle multiple technologies to lower transaction costs for ourselves and our corporate partners? Can we use bundled technologies to do more deals? And we've done those across Canada. I'll tell you they're hard. Universities tend not to do it. We talk about open innovation. We don't use those techniques, but the combination of the understanding that we get from the Southern paradigm and the research plan, because the research plan is a timing, it's a pace-setting tool that lets us anticipate, lets us go out and look for technologies that are complementary or supplementary. And then we have to find a way to build the deal with the other institution. And we've done that a handful of times in my offices, particularly over the last 8 years in Canada. Only a handful of times, I'll hasten to add. But these are the sorts of tools that really help accelerate tech transfer. So it's the iterative process where we've shaped those invention disclosures. It's the research plan that heretofore we had not seen. Now we understand the research plan. And understand that I expect that we're going to see 3 out of 10. For every 10 faculty members, we're probably going to see 3 who provide us with that in-depth research plan. Maybe between 3 and 5 investigators can provide that or will provide that plan. it's a process that simply adds to the tool, the Southern paradigm. This slide, then, we're going to try to bring all this back as we really focus on the important thing, which is commercialization and how it fits. So we know that the Southern paradigm is a disclosure shaping tool. And the way you'll know that is that after we've had the first meeting and we've followed up with a publication or a patent application, and then 3 months later followed up with another publication or another, preferably, issued patent application, when we get an invention disclosure, we're going to hear the invention disclosure is going to come to us, and we're going to hear words like, gee, this is the idea. It's a lot like Smith's idea, but it's different because, or this technology does not use the same enzymes, or we're using a different substrate as we get started into this process. So what we know then is that we've shaped the disclosure. We probably shaped the claim structure, so we're not going to have 35 claims, and where we end up issuing 8 or 9. So we're going to probably shape the claim structure, and we may know much more about those luminaries, competitive laboratories where we can use open innovation techniques. Commercialization then really flows much easier when we've done that early disclosure patent shaping. If we've done it right, we're going to understand the general nature of the white space that exists between patents that are out there. We're going to have some notions about claim structure, and incidentally, and this process may point us to other tools that we can use. But again, it's all based on having that level of service that we delivered by those initial conversations and follow-ups that weren't expected. The faculty member does not really expect to hear back from us. They think they're going to get a meeting and we're going to disappear because that's what university bureaucrats tend to do. So we really differentiated ourselves. We established a dialogue. We've taken the step towards keeping the dialogue alive. We're moving into the process, and so the next slide is something that we use with internal. We think about creativity with our innovators, with the researchers, and they certainly are creative and they're innovators and all that. But there's a creativity that the tech transfer professionals bring too. The deal structure, we know how creative that can be. The negotiation process is the essence of creativity and brainstorming and all of that. But the Southern paradigm is also, and the way we handle the Southern paradigm is important. The creative use of market research resources and patent databases. So you know about some of those. I won't talk too much. There are many that we like. There are some that have disappointed us through the years. One that I will mention is Thompson Innovation. It's a terrific tool to help one understand white space and claims and the movement across business. So if we do those heat maps or those intensity maps, sometimes they can help. But again, that tool really works best when we understand the Southern paradigm, when we've used it and we really have the basics. So I think that's the approach to the Southern paradigm. I think that's how we generate new technology disclosures. I guarantee that you'll double them. It makes the process much more satisfying for the tech transfer professional and certainly for the academic. The problem is it's labor intensive. But we all got into this business because we like intensity. And as we wind down, and I see that our time is getting tight, and want to make sure that we have time for questions. I'd like to recommend, and we seldom do this, but I'd like to recommend that you look at this book. It's a very quick read. It's light. It was new a few months ago, and I passed out 24 copies of it. I wish I had a copy for each of you. But it's The Coming Jobs War. It's not about particularly jobs war. It's about the focus on countries and cities and the way they create jobs and make jobs their number one mission. And the important thing is that Clifton, who's the chairman of the Gallup Group, as you may know, and his whole discussion about jobs, he brings it back to around to the focus on the university and what the university has. And he talks about innovation. He talks about entrepreneurship. He talks about international contacts and international collaborations. And those are the things that good, strong tech transfer offices always bring to the fore. So while he's making some conversations, some of them are even sort of some points, some of them are sort of political, while he's making those conversations and those points about creating jobs and ameliorating the financial conditions of the today, he also brings the focus has to come back to universities and community leaders. So I would just encourage you to read this book. I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's great food for thought. It's a book that you can pass around campus after you've read it. I think you'll enjoy it. And I hope we can get together someday and move beyond then this whole idea of stimulating invention disclosures and how we do that to technology diffusion, and I've called it here from Toffler to Twitter. I think Toffler wrote that book back in the 70s, Future Shock, and I think the discussion of the Southern paradigm and using research plans as a way to plan the development of IP and plan our expenses and plan our workload, as we look at that, I think then we're set up for this notion of we can look at technology diffusion. I think we want to look at classical promotion strategies, electronic and otherwise. And I've listed tech transfer tactics. It's a good name for what we do every day. It's a great name for a publication and a best practices organization. I hope we can talk about that next time. And I hope that you'll consider the Southern paradigm as the first step towards open innovation. I say it's an 8-letter word. Whether that word is leverage or bundling, doesn't matter. Open innovation, we want to get to that. We all need to make a renewed commitment to use those open innovation tools and concepts in our practice every day. Unfortunately, we don't. And I can't understand. I think it's because we assume that if we're going to bring technologies into our offices, that we're going to have to pay money and create transactions to bundle the technology. I don't think that's true. I think we can be more creative than that. I think it's a win-win for various offices. But the truth is, open innovation and those open innovation concepts really flow back, and success in that flow back to the effective use of some of the techniques used in the Southern paradigm. So I hope we have some questions, and I'd be happy to talk about the Southern paradigm and open innovation. And I think there may be a couple of members of the group that have used this paradigm in the past, and so I'll leave it at that. Thank you again to Technology Transfer Tactics and to the participants. I hope that I'll see you next week.
Thank you. At this time, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question, please utilize the public chat box to the lower left of your screen, or you may press 0 and the 1 key on your touch-tone phone. This will place you into queue, and one at a time I can open your line so that you may each ask a question. Again, that is 0-1 on your telephone keypad. If your question has been answered or you wish to remove yourself from the queue, you may press 0 and the 2 key. We do have a question, it looks like, that came in via the chat, and it reads, Gary, with all the invention disclosures you receive, how do you manage the commercialization expectations of deans, chairs, and faculty?
Well, it's a terrific question, Tanya. Thank you. I hope it's an interesting question. Neat. I think we fly under the radar screen when it comes to those expectations. With the faculty member in that first session I can remember years ago I came in for one of those sessions. I was calling on a faculty member. He and I had chatted. He brought me into the lab, closed the door. A woman walked in beside him, sat down, and I'm going to say that this man was 65, and he said, I've had a wonderful career at this medical school. We've done great science. We've had terrific publications, high citations, impactful journals, and I'm very, very unhappy. And in fact, then he told me how bitter he was about how he didn't feel that he'd been rewarded. And that, of course, we might expect that dialogue in our first discussion. So we really are going to hear. We're going to hear those sort of remarks, and they're going to set the tone for how does this deal get structured. Am I going to look for a larger upfront fee? Am I going to be willing to be more patient? So I do think the faculty expectations are really elucidated and clarified, and they really are crystal clear when we walk out of that meeting. And of course, they become even more so as we prove our mettle, prove our worth as we communicate. We really try to avoid visibility to deans and chairs about the ongoing discussion about commercialization. So I hope that answered the question.
Great,
and I see another one.
Yeah, we do have another one. It comes from Vesna. It reads, any difference in approach you suggest between inventor-owned and shared IP policies?
Vesna, thank you very much. I suspect, I hope you're in Canada. I hope it's warm there. It's going to be minus 39 in Winnipeg tonight, minus 39 Canadian, minus 39 C. No, there is no difference in this approach, whether it's inventor-owned or if it's shared IP. There's absolutely no difference. In either event, what we've really established is a win-win, that there's a partnership. The partnership is built on science, collegiality, and service, and we have to demonstrate that service, and it's easy enough to do that with some work. It's the 15 or 20 or 30 minutes before we meet with a faculty member, that long leisurely conversation, and then a follow-up, and then continuing follow-ups that prove that we're committed to providing service. But there's no difference in either of those two forms.
Great, thank you. I'd like to give a reminder to our audience. If you wish to ask a question, please utilize the public chat, or you may press 0 and the 1 key on your telephone keypad. We'll move on to our next question. It comes from Jean, and it reads, what type of search strategies, software systems, etc., do you use in research, other IP that is out there or being developed, so that you can get back to the faculty to give him or her that information?
Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much for stepping forward with this question. We do like we've used most of the popular market research vehicles, and we have some favorites. There's no doubt that our favorite is the terrific Thompson package. Very, very expensive, whatever it is, $30,000, $50,000. So the very expensive package, but terrific package. We tend to buy two kinds of services. We want to be able to see patents and find white space, and also sometimes track the evolution of claims. And one can do that with certain tools. We want to be able to do that, and of course, we want to also be able to understand transactions. Sometimes it's hard to because the information is still rejected. It is sometimes hard to see current day transactions, but we know the comps, and I think everyone in our field does. We understand the comps, but we do use certain databases to track recent deals.
Great, thank you. And we'll wait just a few moments to see if there's any more questions that come in. All right, and I am not seeing any further questions, so I will turn it back to you, Gary, for any further remarks.
Well, I would just say thanks. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Louisiana. I hope it is where you are. Thanks to Technology Transfer Tactics. Thanks to Debbie and Kim for making this move so smoothly. And thanks for your interest. This is the lifeblood of your program. The importance cannot be overstated. It's a terrific, this is a terrific tool that you have, and it's very simple, and it's all about service and relationships. So please use it, and I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about problems, or if you can try it next week before you come to San Antonio, please do. Look for me. I'll be at all the receptions for sure, and I hope you'll introduce yourself, and I'd love to see you there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gary. We did actually have some questions come in, so I'll go ahead and read those now. We have one from Adrian, and it reads, it appears to be very efficient to increase and enhance the quality of disclosures in a single university, but how do you think it can be spread?
I think it only works, Adrian, I think it only works in a single university, and I think it's very, very difficult in a large university. So if I can imagine some of the largest land-grant universities in the U.S., very, very large universities, maybe where a technology manager has 150 or 200 innovators that they're working with, it's a very difficult program to implement. But it does, it is really handcrafted service, and of course that's why it works. We all respond to handcrafted services.
All right, thank you. And we do have one more question. It reads, many faculties have arrangements with corporates. How do you manage your TTO relationship with such facilities? Faculties, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's tricky. Frankly, I wish I didn't see this question. Yesterday there was a rather heated discussion on our campus about treatment of intellectual property. I have to admit I was one of the combatants. And in our approach to corporate relationships, and this morning early on, and I just answered briefly, a faculty member wrote and was very unhappy. He thought there had been a request by a very, very close corporate partner in engineering that had a chilling effect on the academic milieu. And of course these things really bother. I find that tech transfer professionals, if we're doing our jobs right, we're often the one who defends the academic milieu. We're the first ones to see a conflict of interest. We're the ones to identify, or we're ones to produce creative ideas about how to manage conflict. And we stimulate these sort of relationship with corporate entities, and it's a constant battle. And often these are self-imposed discussions. The corporate world just wants clear rules and clear understanding and equal treatment, and we can provide that. But sometimes, especially in today's financial environment, whether I was in London 2 years ago when tuition rates were changed and there were riots in the street, I had a hard time getting to the airport. So wherever you are, whether you're in London or Louisiana or Winnipeg or wherever you happen to be, the financial exigencies of the day really make academics take a second look, and sometimes not as creative a look as we could in these relationships with corporates.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today's program. As I mentioned, you may purchase a copy of this program as a DVD, video on demand, or as a PDF transcript. Simply call 877-729-0959, or you may visit www.technologytransfertactics.com to order. That concludes our program today. Until next time, goodbye.